burn their own house down. Yeah, read that again. Because your ex, they didn't just walk away. They set the match. They stood there and watched it burn. And now they're shocked the smoke followed them home. See, here's what they don't want to admit out loud. They helped commit a spiritual crime against someone the universe had marked. You weren't just another person. You were a walking miracle, wrapped in human skin. But they treated you like an option, then aligned with gossipers, traitors, and low vibrational thieves, thinking the universe wouldn't notice. Let me say it louder for the ones in the back. You don't get to mishandle someone who came into your life as a blessing and walk away with blessings. That's not how the universe works. That's not how energy works. And now, they're waking up to the bill. Before we get deeper, do your part to keep this fire going. Don't forget to pay this message back. And it's our duty to... Now, let's talk facts. Your ex didn't just hurt you. They disrespected your spirit. They saw the glow. They felt the pull. But they still gambled with your heart like it was a cheap token at some spiritual casino. And now, the universe is collecting what it's owed. See, a breakup is one thing. People fall out of love every day. But what they did, that was spiritual warfare in disguise. They didn't just move on. They joined forces with your enemies, mocked your pain, laughed at your healing, tried to replace your light with chaos. And the wildest part? They thought karma was asleep. But karma doesn't forget. It learns your name. It takes notes. And it waits. Oh, how it waits. Now, they're restless. Can't sleep, can't focus. Every wind turns sour. Every room feels cold. Why? Because they're haunted by the absence of your presence. Chosen one, this is why your energy is not ordinary. You weren't just a partner. You were a divine lifeline. But they cut the cord, and now they're choking on silence. Here's the part they'll never admit. They were never ready for someone like you. You showed up too real, too pure, too damn powerful, and that scared them. So instead of rising up to meet your level, they tried to pull you down to theirs. But when they failed, they blamed you and ran to the crowd, let others throw dirt on your name while they smiled, thinking they had won. But spiritual crimes don't come with applause. They come with echoes. They come with visions. They come with backlash. Now they hear your voice in their dreams, see your face in strangers, feel your energy in places you've never even been. They're searching for you in every smile and coming up empty. And here's the funny twist. They swore you were replaceable. But now, even their new peace feels loud. Even their upgrade feels empty. Because they didn't just lose a partner. They lost spiritual protection. They lost access to someone who prayed for them, believed in them, and tried to bring light into their darkest spaces. And that kind of loss doesn't just hurt, it echoes. So if you're sitting here doubting your worth, wondering if they ever cared, let this be your proof. They didn't just mess up. They committed a spiritual violation against someone who was sent to elevate them. They helped pull the trigger on their own downfall, and now they're living in the shadow of the crime. So if this message has already started hitting that Let's break this down step by step. Stay with me, because if you're truly one of the chosen, your soul won't let you click away. You're gonna feel this in your bones. Let's get into it. Number 1. They didn't just lose a lover. They spit in the face of grace. The most dangerous kind of fool is the one who mistakes divine protection for ordinary affection and then throws it away like trash. Let that sink in. Because your ex, they didn't just break your heart. They violated something sacred. They didn't just walk away from a relationship. They walked out on a spiritual contract and acted like it was just a breakup. But when the universe assigns someone to your life, someone with power, protection, and purpose attached, and you betray that, oh, the consequences come wearing heavy boots. Chosen one, you weren't just a phase in their life. You were a portal, a shift, a divine upgrade wrapped in human skin. But instead of recognizing that, they treated you like a pit stop on their way to destruction. And now they're looking around, wondering why nothing's working, why peace won't stay, why every door they touch feels cursed. It's because they broke a covenant, not just a connection. You see, when you enter the life of a chosen one, you don't just date them, you enter a spiritual agreement. An agreement that says, I'm walking with a soul that's here on assignment. And with that agreement comes covering, elevation, protection, and yes, consequences if violated. Most people don't know this, but the reason your ex started winning in life the moment you showed up was because you carried spiritual authority. You had favor on your life. You were walking blessings into their home, into their business, into their mind. That peace they had, that was your energy. That structure in their chaos, that was your discipline. Those sudden opportunities, your light attracted that. But they didn't get it. They thought you were just too emotional, too intense, too serious. They thought they could play with you like you were one of those lost souls they were used to dealing with. They thought they could ghost you, lie to you, manipulate you, and align with people who secretly wanted your fall, and it wouldn't cost them anything. Now look at them, confused, exhausted, paranoid, spiritually bankrupt. Because when you betray someone with universal backing, you don't just lose the relationship, you lose the covering that came with it. You lose the silent blessings, the quiet protection, the unseen hand that was keeping your enemies out and your path clear. And now they're exposed. And maybe they're out there right now, putting on a smile for social media, trying to prove they leveled up. But behind that screen is a haunted mind, because deep down they know they lost something they'll never replace. You don't get a second version of a chosen one. There's no substitute. And the universe doesn't hand out souls like yours on every corner. Let's break this even further. People might ask, well, wasn't it just a breakup? Aren't people allowed to leave if it's not working? Of course. We're not here to trap anyone, but let's get this straight. There's a difference between leaving with respect and committing a spiritual betrayal. There's a difference between choosing peace and choosing violence against someone's soul. Your ex didn't just fall out of love. They fell into darkness, and instead of reaching for your hand, they reached for gossip, temptation, and cowardice. They aligned with your spiritual enemies and helped tear you down, then wondered why their life started falling apart. It's because they didn't just walk away from a partner. They walked away from their own elevation. The most dangerous mistake they made wasn't in what they said. It was in what they touched. They touched something holy, mishandled it, mocked it, disrespected it. And now the same hands they used to fumble you with can't seem to hold on to anything good. And let's be real, some of them knew exactly who you were. They knew you were different. They just thought your grace meant you'd never walk away. They thought you'd always forgive, always come back, always lower your light to make them feel taller. But the moment you cut the cord, the silence became spiritual warfare. Because you were never just some girl or some guy they dated. You were a divine mirror, and once you left, they were forced to sit with their own reflection. And it's ugly. Now they're haunted by the version of themselves you tried to help them become. They're grieving potential, not love, potential. And that's the worst kind of grief. Because it's not just about missing you, it's about knowing they destroyed their own elevation out of ego and ignorance. You ever wonder why their new connections don't last? Why their peace feels fake? Why they look happy, but you can still feel the cracks through the screen? That's not intuition, that's spiritual truth. They're being reminded every day of what they lost. The universe isn't letting them forget. And chosen one, don't you dare feel bad. Don't let the enemy convince you that your standards were too high or your heart was too much. You weren't too much. You were exactly what they prayed for until they got it and didn't know what to do with it. But don't worry. The universe saw everything, every betrayal, every lie, every time they sided with the enemy, every time they laughed at your pain, every moment they mocked your worth behind closed doors. And now, the same force that sent you into their life is removing you for their protection and your rise. Here's the part they never saw coming. They thought the pain would destroy you, but instead it woke you up. It made you colder, smarter, stronger. They thought breaking you would break your destiny. Instead, it triggered your transformation. They don't even realize it yet, but they weren't just part of your story. They were the plot twist that elevated you to your next level. They were the betrayal that turned into your breakthrough. So let them watch. Let them wonder. Let them scroll in silence, checking your page with regret in their chest and a lump in their throat. Because they didn't just lose a lover. They lost a once-in-a-lifetime divine connection that was sent to shift their entire life. And now, they're stuck replaying the moment they fumbled the rarest soul they'll ever know. You were the blessing, and they treated you like a burden. Now the burden is theirs, forever. Number 2, they didn't just fall out of love. They walked out on their own blessing. The most tragic betrayal isn't when they leave you. It's when they abandon their own elevation and don't realize it until everything they touch starts falling apart. Let's get one thing straight. They didn't just leave a relationship. They walked out of alignment. They stepped out of flow, out of protection, out of purpose. And the moment they did, the shift was immediate. Suddenly, the favor that followed them started to dry up. The energy that used to make life easier vanished. Doors that once opened without effort slammed shut. Connections they thought were solid turned cold. And the peace they bragged about? Gone. Like a dream you wake up from and can't get back to sleep. See, when you're connected to a chosen one, you're not just dating a person. You're walking with spiritual authority. You're aligning with purpose, protection, elevation. But when you betray that, when you lie, cheat, gossip, or abandon someone marked by the universe, you don't just fall out of love. You fall out of divine alignment. That's why their life feels off now. That's why no amount of fun, no new partner, no party, no distraction is enough to fill the void. They didn't just lose you, they lost the favor that followed your presence. And now they're restless. You can feel it, you can sense the shift. They're watching from afar, pretending they're fine, but every smile is cracked, every laugh a little too forced. And the crazy part? They talk about you more now than when they had you. Why? Because regret is loud when peace is gone. They can't stop thinking about you, not because they miss the good times, but because deep down, they know they fumbled the assignment. It's funny, isn't it? How they thought they were gaining freedom, only to end up imprisoned by their own choices. How they thought they were upgrading, only to find themselves surrounded by people who don't nourish their soul, don't challenge their growth, and definitely don't carry the kind of light you did. You weren't just love, you were medicine, and they traded that for ego, temptation, and shallow validation. Now everything around them feels empty. Even the things they once chased, money, attention, status, don't hit the same, because those things only shine in the presence of real peace. And peace? That left when you did. You ever wonder why they look like they're glowing outside but drained inside? That's what happens when you fake a smile through spiritual drought. Because this isn't just about heartbreak. This is about spiritual consequence. You don't betray someone sent to elevate you and expect your life to stay elevated. You were their covering, their favor, their divine mirror. You made them reflect. You held them accountable. You pushed them toward growth, healing, vision. And instead of rising with you, they ran from the light. They mocked it. They resented it, because it exposed the parts of themselves they weren't ready to face. So now they're haunted, not by ghosts, but by memories, by missed potential, by the sound of your voice in moments of silence. They may not show it, but they feel it, the weight of what they lost, the spiritual cost of their betrayal. And while they try to rebuild their life, there's this undeniable absence they can't replace. And chosen one, don't you dare feel bad. Don't let their silence confuse you. Their pride may never let them admit it, but their spirit knows. They may smile in pictures, laugh with their new peace, but the energy doesn't lie. You left a mark. You were the alignment they didn't even know they needed until they ruined it. And that's the part that hurts them the most. They could have built with you, healed with you, won with you, but they chose betrayal over blessing. And the universe doesn't reward that. No matter how much they fake it, they're battling spiritual friction. They can feel it every time they try to move forward, but feel chained to the past. That's not nostalgia. That's the cost of stepping out of alignment with someone chosen. So let them watch. Let them scroll. Let them keep your name in their mouth while pretending they've moved on. Because behind all that noise is a soul that knows they lost something holy, something rare, something they'll never touch again. They didn't just fall out of love. They walked away from their own alignment, and now they're paying the price. Number 3, they had the keys to the kingdom and burned the blueprint. The greatest tragedy isn't being betrayed. It's giving someone front row seats to your soul, and they show up drunk, reckless, and blind. Let's be clear, this wasn't someone who didn't know better. This was someone who had full access. They saw your vulnerability. They witnessed your loyalty in real time. They heard your truth when it was still trembling in your throat. You handed them the map to your soul, and instead of honoring it, they set it on fire. Not because they didn't recognize your value, but because their ego screamed louder than their wisdom. You didn't hide your heart. You gave it in raw, sacred form. They didn't have to guess who you were. You showed them. You made it easy to love you. And still, they fumbled. Still, they chose recklessness over reverence. And now, they can't unsee you. They can't unfeel you. You've become a ghost with unfinished business, living rent-free in the corners of their mind. Every time they meet someone new, it's your shadow they compare them to. Every time they try to replace you, it's your energy they chase and never find again. Because you weren't just a partner, you were a spiritual experience. You weren't the lesson, they were the test. And they failed. Loudly, publicly, spiritually. Let's break that down. People always assume the chosen one is the one learning. But what if you were the evidence, the mirror, the one sent to expose whether someone could handle what they prayed for? That's what makes it worse. You were the answered prayer. But they weren't ready. And instead of admitting their fear, their smallness, their immaturity, they tried to destroy the very thing sent to elevate them. They were spiritually reckless, like a person given the crown jewels and using them as paperweights. They thought access meant ownership. They thought your kindness meant you'd never leave. They thought your presence was permanent. But chosen ones don't beg to be seen. We walk when we're mishandled and let the silence do the talking. History is full of people who were mishandled by those they trusted the most. Joseph's own brothers threw him in a pit, blind to the greatness they were discarding. Frida Kahlo gave her heart to a man who couldn't handle her pain, her passion, her truth. Malcolm X was betrayed by people inside his own movement. Over and over, the story is the same. Chosen ones are often betrayed by the very people who had the clearest view of their power. And every time the pattern repeats: betrayal, separation, elevation, because the universe never forgets. Hurting a chosen one isn't just a bad breakup, it's a cosmic offense. It sends a ripple into the divine plan. And the universe, it always balances the books, not out of revenge, but alignment. What was sent to grow them, they tried to bury, and now they're reaping weeds where there could have been a garden. So when they sit in silence, when the fake smiles crack, when the new love feels empty and plastic, they'll remember not just what they lost, but how foolishly they held it. They had the keys to a kingdom they weren't mature enough to rule, and now they're locked out, watching you build what they were too reckless to protect. Number 4. They treated gold like gravel. Now the curse wears their name. When a fool mishandles what was sent to bless them, the universe doesn't just watch, it responds. Let's talk facts. They had something in their hands that people cry for, beg for, search lifetimes for, and they spit on it. Not because it wasn't valuable, but because their ego convinced them that value doesn't matter when it's already in your possession. And now, the curse is unfolding in real time, slow, icy, unforgiving. Because when you treat gold like gravel, you don't just lose the treasure, you trigger a spiritual drought. Chosen one, they didn't walk away from a good person. They walked away from a sacred assignment, someone who was sent into their life to protect, to anchor, to elevate. You were the steady hand in their chaos. The quiet prayer they never knew was being said over them, the energetic covering that kept certain storms from ever reaching them. But because you didn't come wrapped in arrogance or games, they thought you were ordinary. They mistook your softness for weakness, your forgiveness for foolishness, your loyalty for low standards. They saw your glow and assumed it was effortless. They never once paused to ask what it cost you to still love with that kind of intensity after everything you've survived. They didn't see the nights you cried yourself into resilience, the childhood wounds you alchemized into wisdom, the betrayals you transmuted into boundaries. No, your healing wasn't obvious enough to scare them, so they got comfortable, then careless, then cold, until they thought pushing you to the edge wouldn't change anything. But you weren't built to stay where you're not valued. You don't beg for seats at tables you were born to build. And when you finally walked, that's when the curse kicked in, quiet at first, then loud enough to make them sweat at night. That same job they bragged about feels hollow now. Those shallow hookups they swore were better than your depth. can't hold a candle to the peace you brought with your presence. That upgrade they posted online turns out to be all packaging, no substance. Now they're stuck in empty rooms, surrounded by loud laughs with no soul behind them. Meanwhile, you, evolving, glowing, healing on levels they don't even have language for. You're rising in silence while they shrink in noise. And they feel it. Every scroll through social media, every time your name comes up, every time someone asks, what happened to her? They feel it. That ache in their spirit. That's the consequence of disrespecting something that was sent to save them. Let's go deeper. History tells this same story. Vincent van Gogh gave his genius to a world that mocked him. Harriet Tubman was doubted by the very people she risked her life to free. Jesus himself was betrayed by someone sitting at the same table. Chosen ones are rarely honored in the moment. They're remembered in the wake of the collapse they never deserved. And when the collapse hits, it always looks the same. A once blessed person now wandering through consequences they can't pray their way out of. And the cruel irony, you never asked for worship, just honesty, respect, effort, a little consistency. But because they couldn't even bring that to the table, they cursed their own name. And now that curse has a face: regret. You weren't just love, you were a lifeline, a rare breed of soul who loves with intention, stands with power, and forgives with grace. But they were too blind, too prideful, too spiritually reckless to see it. So now they're left fumbling their own downfall, and it's not bad luck, it's a universal correction. They didn't just lose you, they lost their access, their favor, their peace, and now they're learning the hard way. When you treat sacred things like trash, the universe doesn't just take it back, it leaves you with silence and shadow. And chosen one, that silence is your confirmation. You were never too much. They were just too small. Number 5. When you treat a divine connection like disposable currency, don't be shocked when the universe closes your account. Spiritual currency isn't paper, it's presence. And when you spend it like pocket change, don't cry when you're left bankrupt in the soul. Let's call this what it really is, a spiritual crime scene. Because when someone is sent into your life carrying protection, peace, and purpose, and you treat them like they're disposable, you're not just hurting a person, you're robbing yourself of access to divine flow. And the universe, it doesn't let that slide. There's no plea deal for spiritual violations. There's just correction, often disguised as chaos. You were never just a girlfriend, just a boyfriend, just someone they dated. You were spiritual currency, a walking breakthrough in human form. You brought clarity into confusion, calm into storms, elevation into stagnation. They didn't have to ask for miracles. You were the miracle. You didn't just walk into their life, you shifted the entire atmosphere when you arrived. But instead of protecting that energy, they spent it carelessly, like it would never run out. They laughed at the idea of loss, took your loyalty for granted, ignored the way your presence healed them silently. And now they're stuck in the emotional aftermath of their own arrogance. They're in that quiet stage of collapse, where nothing feels right and nothing feels exciting. The lights are on, but the soul is empty. You know the stage I'm talking about. They're posting pictures like life's amazing, smiling like the pains in the past. But inside, they're cracking. The guilt is creeping in. The what-ifs are screaming. Every happy moment is chased by the shadow of your absence. That new person they thought was a better fit can't even string together a conversation that touches their spirit. That new life they flaunted looks like gold but feels like plastic. They thought walking away from you was freedom. Now it feels like spiritual jail. Because spiritual currency has a value they never studied. It's not loud. It doesn't boast. It just stabilizes everything it touches. And the second they lost access to your frequency, everything in their world began to tilt. Nothing sits right. Food doesn't taste the same. Victories feel empty. Nights are long. And joy fleeting. Not because you curse them, not because you're punishing them, but because spiritual law never forgets. It's written in energetic ink. They disrespected something rare, and now they're drowning in the result. The soul remembers what the ego denied. They tried to replace you with common energy, thinking you were just another option. But now, surrounded by actual common, they're suffocating in mediocrity. That temporary thrill can't mask the echo of your absence. And every time they try to silence the regret, the universe cranks up the volume. Too bad the realization came after the loss was permanent, because the moment they mishandled you, the universe closed their account. And now they're learning, when you treat a divine connection like pocket change, life gives you nothing but pennies in return. Number 6. They didn't ghost you. They tried to bury the evidence, but the guilt dug it back up. Silence isn't healing when it's built on guilt. It's just a graveyard where cowards bury their truth, and it always comes back haunted. Let's kill the illusion right now. That disappearing act, the sudden cold shoulder, the unread messages and hollow silence, that wasn't protecting peace. That wasn't needing space. That was spiritual damage control. A frantic attempt to bury the evidence of a betrayal they didn't have the courage to face. They didn't ghost you because they were done. They ghosted because they were guilty. They knew exactly what they did, and they knew exactly what they lost. But instead of standing up and owning the consequences like someone with integrity, they ran. Not because they were strong, not because they were healing, but because your light exposed their shadow, and that scared the hell out of them. You were too pure, too patient, too present, and in the presence of someone like you, they couldn't lie to themselves anymore. Looking you in the eye would have shattered the carefully constructed story they were telling themselves. That they were the victim, that they had a reason, that they outgrew the connection. But none of that held weight in your truth. Your energy was too real, your presence too powerful. So they vanished, not to find peace, but to avoid accountability. But here's the catch they didn't count on. You can ghost a person, but you can't ghost the universe. You can avoid the conversation, block the number, disappear from the timeline, but you can't outrun the energy you put out. And now, that energy is circling back. Fast, precise, ruthless. Every quiet moment they fought so hard to manufacture is now an echo chamber of shame. The song on the radio hits different. The places they used to go with you feel haunted. Dreams aren't restful. They're reruns of all the things they tried to forget. Conversations with new people turn awkward when someone brings up your name. And that peace they tried to fake, it's cracking at the seams. Let's be real, they didn't ghost you. They ghosted the version of themselves they didn't want to face. The liar, the manipulator, the one who fumbled something sacred and tried to play it cool. But spiritual conviction is louder than pride. It doesn't need receipts. It doesn't wait for closure. It begins the moment your actions betray someone protected by universal law. Their silence wasn't power, it was panic. That eerie quiet wasn't growth, it was guilt. And now that guilt is doing what they were too afraid to let happen. It's resurrecting. In memories, in missed chances, in the way they can't breathe fully anymore when your name comes up in a room. In the way your energy still lingers like a ghost at the back of their mind, reminding them that they could have had forever, but chose fear. They thought they could bury it, but what they didn't realize was this: truth doesn't stay buried, it rises, just like you did. And now, while you glow with grace and move forward with alignment, they're left standing in the same place they ran to for shelter, except now it's a cage. A cage built out of silence, locked with guilt, and guarded by the very energy they thought they'd escaped. You didn't lose them. They abandoned the light. And now, they're haunted by what they tried to silence. Because your presence always spoke louder than their lies. Number 7, they didn't just lie to you, they opened the gates to a spiritual ambush. Some betrayals aren't just emotional, they're orchestrated by energy that couldn't reach you head-on, so it crept in through someone you loved. Let's make this brutally clear. What you went through wasn't a messy breakup or romantic confusion. It was spiritual warfare dressed as intimacy. This wasn't just a lie. They handed your name to your enemies on a silver platter, smiled in your face, and then watched you bleed behind closed doors. While you loved from a place of purity, with a heart that wanted to heal and build, they were entertaining whispers from people who wanted you broken. These weren't harmless jokes or harmless chats. These were strategy sessions of envy and sabotage, and they showed up for them, smiling, nodding, participating. Every time your name came up in those circles, they didn't flinch, they leaned in. You thought you were safe. You thought love meant protection. But what you didn't know was that the one you were trying to build with was spiritually rented out. They let lower energies use their mouth, their body, their choices to try and break you. Not because they didn't see your light, but because your light intimidated the hell out of them. You were walking elevation, and they felt smaller next to you. Instead of rising, they aligned. With gossipers, with the bitter, with the jealous, with the ones who couldn't stand the way you were shining without effort. Instead of defending your name, they sat at tables where your glow was picked apart like a threat. They fed fires started by people too weak to face you head-on. That's not immaturity. That's spiritual treason. Let's call it what it is: infiltration. You weren't just betrayed, you were infiltrated. Someone got close enough to touch your core, to access your sacred softness, and chose to leak that energy to forces that wanted your light dimmed. You were busy pouring in, praying for them, holding space for their healing. Meanwhile, they were handing your blueprint to your enemies like it was nothing. That's not a mistake. That's strategy. That's a soul-level hit job. And you felt it. You saw the red flags, didn't you? The shift in tone, the new coldness, the subtle digs. But instead of leaving, you chose to love harder. You were on assignment, not just in love. You thought maybe your presence could shift the atmosphere. Maybe your prayers could cover their cracks. But by the time you realized they were leaking your light into the wrong hands, they'd already let the poison in. They tried everything: silence, ghosting, triangulation, emotional games, to wear you down, to make you question your worth. And when none of it worked, when you refused to crumble, they pulled away entirely, hoping that your own heart would destroy you from the inside. But here's the part they never saw coming. You weren't unprotected. You were watched over, guarded, divinely shielded. Every whisper recorded, every dagger counted, every table where your name was desecrated, now drenched in spiritual consequences. They thought your silence meant defeat, but it was actually the moment the universe stood up on your behalf. Now the backlash is real. The confusion they tried to leave you with, it's sitting heavy on their own chest. The chaos they fed, it's taking root in their own life. Nothing flows. Peace is gone. Joy is artificial. Because when you partner with darkness to try to destroy light, the darkness doesn't leave you unmarked. And here's the deeper tragedy. They didn't just lose you, they lost the last chance they had at real alignment. You were the lifeline, the reset, the spiritual mirror they didn't want to face. And now they're left with smoke, mirrors, and ghosts of a love they'll never get back. So no, they didn't just lie. They co-signed a spiritual assassination, and now the cost is echoing through every corner of their life. Because when you hand the sacred over to the bitter, the sacred doesn't burn, the betrayer does. Number 8. Your energy was their blessing, but they mocked the hand that held them. Fools don't just lose the blessing, they offend the source, and then wonder why the storm hits different after you leave. They thought you were just sweet, just patient, just kind. They mistook your warmth for weakness, your intuition for fantasy, your glow for lucky timing. But what they failed to realize is this: you were the shield between them and the chaos their choices kept inviting in. You weren't just a partner, you were divine favor wearing skin. And they mocked the very force that was holding their life together. They laughed at your prayers, shrugged off your wisdom, and rolled their eyes when you warned them about energy shifts and spiritual attacks. They joked when you said your spirit felt uneasy. They smirked when you said the universe had a way of correcting imbalance. What they didn't know? Those same crazy things were the only reason the storm hadn't swallowed them whole. You were never ordinary. Your presence in their life was strategic, not accidental. You were assigned to be there, to intercept spiritual consequences, to stabilize the atmosphere, to stand in the gap where their discipline, their accountability, their growth should have been. You were spiritually covering someone who never once paused to say thank you. And now they feel the shift. Everything's heavier now. There's a pressure in their chest they can't explain. Anxiety that doesn't go away, confusion that lingers. Opportunities dry up before they land. Friendships feel off. Even sleep doesn't hit the same. It's not depression. It's not bad vibes. It's not Mercury in retrograde. It's the absence of your divine covering. You made life lighter for them. That wasn't coincidence. That was alignment. That was your energy moving behind the scenes, praying when they were out partying, meditating on their behalf when they couldn't focus, staying soft and anchored, even when they lashed out. You were the peace in the middle of their internal war. And now that you're gone, the battlefield has reclaimed its territory. They thought the calm was normal. They thought the wins were just their hard work. They thought the glow was theirs alone. But what they had was a borrowed blessing, one they mocked until it walked away. They didn't see it before because your love was so pure, it looked effortless. But you carried the weight for two. You filled spiritual gaps they didn't even know they had. They just thought they were doing better. No, they were being carried. And now, stripped of that covering, life feels raw. Every decision feels risky. The consequences are no longer delayed. The blessings have stopped showing up on time because the source they mocked, that source was you, connected, covered, spiritually locked in, and they disrespected it like it was noise. Here's the painful truth they're wrestling with right now. The blessing didn't leave because it was done giving. It left because it was mocked too many times, and the universe doesn't tolerate repeated dishonor. It lifts what was protecting you and lets you see the truth of what you mishandled. They can try to replace the presence, but they'll never replace the energy, because what you brought wasn't taught. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't fake. It was divinely placed, and they'll spend the rest of their life chasing shadows of what they only understood after it was gone. Number 9. They laughed while you cried, but you were in labor. not loss. The snake laughs at the eagle's silence, forgetting that silence is how the eagle hunts. They watched you fall apart and called it weakness. They saw your tears and whispered that you were fragile. They felt powerful seeing you question your worth, curl into yourself, and try to make sense of a betrayal that hit from behind. And yes, maybe they didn't laugh out loud, but in spirit, they rejoiced. Their pride inflated because they believed they had broken you. They thought walking away would destroy your foundation. That mistreatment would leave you shattered. That silence would suffocate your glow. But what they didn't realize was this: you weren't collapsing. You were contracting. You weren't in defeat. You were in labor. A sacred, messy, terrifying kind of labor. Spiritual, emotional, mental. Your soul was dilating, stretching, ripping open to deliver a version of you that could no longer be manipulated, silenced, or discarded. You weren't breaking down. You were breaking through. Every tear, a cleansing. Every sleepless night, a spiritual detox. Every flash of rage, sadness, numbness. Those were the signs of a soul entering metamorphosis. They thought the pain they caused would poison you, but all it did was purify you. The betrayal you endured wasn't your ending, it was your initiation. You were shedding skin, shaking loose from identities built around survival, codependency, overgiving. Everything in you was being cracked open so that purpose could finally push through. That's not collapse, that's creation. They celebrated too soon. They mistook your grief for failure. They saw your stillness and didn't realize it was strategy. Because chosen ones don't die in the fire. We're forged in it. Ask history. Harriet Tubman lost everything only to become a force that led others to freedom. Nelson Mandela cried behind prison bars, and the world assumed he was finished until he walked out as a president. Every spiritual giant had a labor phase, a dark night of the soul that looked like defeat but birthed destiny. You, chosen one, were not falling apart. You were being rebuilt, with thicker skin, sharper discernment, unshakable peace. And while they mocked, partied, and paraded their new peace, your spirit was doing surgery. Your soul was clearing space, rewiring you for a level they were never designed to follow you into. That's why their joy was short-lived. That's why things started unraveling on their side once you disconnected. Because your presence had been sustaining them, but the moment you chose yourself, the scales rebalanced. They didn't destroy you, they exposed you. They exposed the parts of you that needed healing, the standards you had to raise, the power you forgot you had. And now, look at you, recentered, refined, reborn. They thought your tears made you weak. But those tears watered the garden of your rebirth. They weren't signs of defeat, they were signals of divine transformation. So let them watch, let them ache. Let them reflect on how they danced in your dark hour, unaware that they were dancing at the birth of the version of you that doesn't settle, doesn't beg, and never shrinks. They didn't witness your breakdown, they witnessed your becoming. And now, it's too late to return to the place they abandoned, because the cocoon is gone, and in its place stands a force they were never built to stand beside. You weren't defeated, you were being delivered. Number 10. They fell for a clone and lost the blueprint. A fool doesn't know the value of gold until they trade it for glitter, and find out too late that shine without substance is just dust in disguise. In their arrogance, they thought you were replaceable. They believed they could walk away from something rare and stumble into something equal. But what they failed to understand is that you weren't just a partner. You were the prototype, the original, the blueprint. And when you walk away from the original, All that's left to chase is cheap imitations with no soul. They didn't fall for love. They fell for a clone, a reflection that mimicked your light, borrowed your words, maybe even copied your softness. But imitation is not embodiment. They thought they could trade in divine connection for surface-level compatibility and still come out on top. But now the illusion is fading. The mask is slipping. The energy they thought felt familiar is falling flat. You see, your power was never in what you said. It was in what you carried. That deep, calming presence. That ability to love from a place of healing, not trauma. That patience that wasn't rooted in desperation, but spiritual discipline. The clone they ran to, she can't replicate that. She can mirror the aesthetic, but not the frequency. She can act emotionally intelligent, but it's a performance, not a path. She knows how to be liked, not how to love. And that's the trap they walked into. At first, it probably felt exciting. New face, new vibe, new attention. But now the high has worn off, and they're starting to feel the weight of their decision. It's not just that they miss you, they miss the clarity you brought. The depth, the grounding. Because this new person, she requires nothing of them. No growth, no accountability, no transformation. Just attention, just ego stroking, just surface. They thought you were difficult when all you did was challenge their stagnancy. You wanted them to confront their demons, to evolve, to match your emotional depth with effort and healing. That scared them, so they ran to someone who wouldn't require that. But now that safety feels like a trap, not a home, and what they once called peace now feels like emptiness in disguise. They aren't being loved, they're being mirrored. And the worst part, they know it. Deep down, they can feel the hollowness, the fake support, the shallow connection. They feel unseen, even in company, because what they traded for comfort can't hold the weight of real love. It was never built for it. Meanwhile, you've outgrown that entire cycle. You've moved on, not just physically, but spiritually. You no longer try to make yourself palatable for people who fear real intimacy. You no longer explain your worth to someone who chose fantasy over truth. You've shed the version of you that begged to be understood. You now stand as someone who demands to be received in full or not at all. And they see it. They see you glowing, grounded, and completely unreachable in the spirit. They can't just call you back. The line is dead. Not because you're bitter, but because the covenant is broken. The blessing has been retracted. And what they're left with? A pretty echo. A hollow substitute. A partner who looks the part, but carries no spiritual weight. No matter how many clones they chase, none will carry your grace, your wisdom, your covering. They thought they upgraded, but they downgraded in every category that actually matters. Because divine love doesn't just walk, it ascends. And you were the blueprint. What they're left with now is a shadow, a cheap echo of what they were too blind, too prideful, and too broken to keep. And so, let this be the escape. They didn't just lose you, they lost alignment, protection, and a love that carried weight. You were the original, the spiritual shield, the rare soul they weren't equipped to honor. Let them chase clones while you continue to rise. If this message spoke to your soul, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop the number 77 in the comments to claim your rebirth. And don't keep this healing to yourself. Share it with someone else who needs to remember their power. We rise louder, stronger, and wiser, always. A shadow once